to the workshop.
Hi, today I'm going to be making a wedged loose tenon. We have the major piece of stock here, through which we're going to create a through mortise. Then on the piece that we're joining to it, we're going to create a long tenon that will pass right through this piece of stock until it reaches a shoulder, and then we're going to create a mortise through this second piece into which we can drop a wedge to pull it nice and tight. Now I'm starting with two pieces of prepared timber, planed and square all round, and I've prepared a wedge in advance, and that will be the same angle that we create the slope in the mortise. So let's begin. I want to make sure there's enough meat left behind the wedge so that the wood won't break out when the wedge is driven in. So I'm going to prepare the shoulders back here. So now I can knife that shoulder line right around my component. I'm choosing a mortise chisel which is just a little narrower than our second component, so that we can create a shoulder all the way round our tenon. And I shall mark for a mortise in the middle of our primary component. With the work clamp to the bench, I can chop my mortise. With our mortise cut cleanly, we can move back to our tenon piece. Now we need to create a mortise in this for the wedge, and I'm going to mark back from the shoulder line the thickness of the material it's going through, just roughly like that. And our wedge needs to be able to come a little bit further towards the shoulder if we're going to be pulling the joint tight. So I'll be looking at something moved back a little bit here, perhaps a 1/16 of an inch. Then let's look at our wedge. When that's driven in, we don't want the top of the wedge to have completely disappeared down the hole. So we need to set a width for that mortise of perhaps 2/3 of the way up the wedge, which is roughly there. And also we want this wedge to contact along its length, so we'll want to chop this mortise at an angle as we go through. Now, to accomplish a mortise this short, we're going to drill it, so we'll just mark that mortise in, and then I'll knife the ends of it, and then I want to find the centre for drilling out. So I'll just connect the diagonals. And now we can square that up with some chisels. I'm using the the line I have on the edge here, giving me the angle of the wedge, to make sure that I create a ramp in here at that same angle. Using the smaller chisel to break up and clear the waste, and then the chisel, which is virtually the same size as the wedge, to actually make the cuts, so there's a big reference surface and they stay nice and flat. So with a little bit of tidying up, you can see that our wedge will now fit in tightly, extending both above and below the mortise. So next we need to cut the tenon cheeks, and we just cut the tenon cheeks in the normal way, staying outside of our marked lines. Clean up the cheeks until you get a nice slip fit in your mortise. Then we can mark for the length and trim those sides too. I've marked for the length of my, or should I say the width of my tenon, and I'm just using a gauge to gauge a line ready to trim those cheeks. Just using the router plane to take a fine shaving just to fit this tenon into the mortise. You could of course do this just with a chisel. And that's fitting now, but it's just a little too tight. We couldn't really knock that apart very easily, so we'll take it out again. And we'll just take the finest of shavings just to make that fit a little bit easier. I'll just clean right up to the shoulder line. Because we want these to go together nice and tight. It's looking good. Pop our wedge in. Give it a little tap. And that's looking nice. Just to finish it off, I'll chamfer all the edges on the exposed part of the tenon so they're nice and softened. And then we just want to chamfer up these corners, take the sharpness off those, and we only want to do that up to the point they come out of the mortise, so up to there. So I'm just riding on the heel of the bevel so I don't dig in. Obviously I can't start like that. As soon as I'm into the cut, as soon as the heel is over the wood, I can engage the heel and keep the depth of cut constant. And of course you do need a sharp chisel to be able to do this nice and cleanly. Just to slightly round the edges of those bevels. So I've given it a coat of tung oil. Let's just put it together. Nice, snug fit.
And where do you go out, Ruth?
Wedge fits nicely. Little tap.
Okay. 400 quid or 200 quid or...
Perfect right angle.
It might stop them doing that again.
That's all down to good laying out and careful preparation and cutting. So a loose through wedge tenon. Give it a go.